Hello, friends, and welcome to this episode of SelfKind. I am your host, Erica Webb, and this is a podcast for highly sensitive people brought to you by me, who is also a highly sensitive and neurodivergent woman. And I wanted to talk today a little bit about something that happened last week. And the reason that I want to share this story is because recently I've had quite a few listeners reach out to tell me how much they enjoy the podcast. And I must admit, every time that happens, I am a little bit surprised because sometimes I can tell myself that nobody's really listening and that this doesn't really have the kind of impact that I would like it to. And so it is such a beautiful thing when you reach out. And I want to thank those of you who have done that recently from the bottom of my heart. It makes such a big difference. But the consistent message that's coming back to me is that you really appreciate my honesty and that you appreciate me sharing my experiences because it helps you to feel less alone. And there's this interesting reality in the world of therapy and in counseling that says that counselors should be a little bit of a blank slate and that we don't share of ourselves in the counseling and therapeutic relationship. And that makes a lot of sense. Why you would, you don't come to counseling to hear your counselor talk about themselves. But on a podcast, it's obviously a very different scenario. And one of the things that I really want to be able to offer is my inner experience as a highly sensitive autistic ADHD person so that you know that in the things that you experience, you are not alone. I hear this time and time and time again in my work that people are like, oh, I didn't realize that that wasn't just me, right? I think so many of us walk around feeling like we are broken and that we are somehow different to everybody else, that we experience the world in a completely different way. And whilst we are obviously all experiencing the world in our own unique ways, what I think is really true is that a lot of the suffering that we go through, a lot of the self-doubt, a lot of the worries, a lot of the anxiety, it lives on the inside. And so we don't see that in other people. I had a really interesting conversation with someone recently, kind of in my personal life. Um, and they said to me, you always come across as so confident. And yet I know from what you've told me that that's not always true. And I thought that was really interesting because I thought that that person would definitely not sort of see me as a super, super confident person because they know the insecurities they have. They know me really well. And so it was interesting to have that conversation. And it got me thinking, how often do we do this, right? We walk around thinking that everybody else has got it all figured out and we're just left floundering. But the reality is that it's not just you. We are all stumbling our way through life. And so I feel really comfortable with being honest about this stuff. I've been doing it long enough that I am super happy for you to see that side of me. And so I wanted to share a story with you today that I hope will highlight for you how this sensitivity stuff shows up in real time and how I, as somebody who works with other people who are dealing with the sort of tricky parts of being sensitive, neurodivergent, highly sensitive in the world, how I navigate that when it happens to me, because it does happen to me all the time. Because I don't want it to come across as though, I've got it all figured out and I'm just handing out, great advice, because that's really not true. I am navigating life just like everybody else. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a little while, you might know a little something about the things that I've been through. And so, you know that I am just a regular old human doing my best. But one thing that I have done is very much committed to and set my focus on self-compassion and kindness. And that very much informs how I respond to my humanness and my failings and my struggles and my pain. And so I thought that maybe in sharing this story with you today, hopefully you can feel a little less alone in some of that for yourself. So it's a really simple story, something that happened last week. Very non-threatening kind of stuff, but it highlights how our sensitivity can show up in ways that are really deeply uncomfortable. So last week I needed to take one of my kids to two appointments. Now, one of them was a timed appointment. So there was a time in the calendar that the person was expecting us. And the other one was a drop in. And so we had to, just drop in at any point, give ourselves enough time so that we could get that appointment done and then move on. So I had the thought, I think we can do these back to back. Let's leave early enough that we can go and do the first thing first, and then we can leave. And the next appointment is literally just 1 minute around the corner. We can do them back to back. And I'm thinking, this is great. This is efficient. I won't, lose too much time in my day, get him back to school at a decent time, et cetera, et cetera. So we leave early and we go and we sit in the waiting room of the first appointment. And it's very busy, very, very busy. And we had to take a number and we had to go and sit down and wait for our number to be called. And we're sitting there and we're waiting and we're waiting. And I'm looking at the clock and I'm starting to get nervous because one of the things that I'm very sensitive about is being on time. I do not like being late. And time pressure is one of the things that will dysregulate me really quickly. So if I think I'm in a rush, if I think I'm late and I'm going to put somebody else out, that is kind of really unsettling for me. I find that really hard. And so we're sitting there and I'm looking at the clock and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to be late for our next appointment. We're going to have to figure out when we call it and we just leave, right, without getting the test done that we were there for. So I'm looking at the clock, I'm looking at the people before us, and I'm realizing, hey, we're next. But as I'm looking at the time, I'm sort of calculating in my head, how long are we going to be in there? How long is this going to take? We're going to be running to the wire if we wait around for our turn. And so with 10 minutes to go to our next appointment, I say, you know what? We just have to leave because we're going to be late if we don't go. We're going to be early if we leave now, but if we wait for the test, we're going to be late. So we make the decision to leave. We get in the car, we drive around the corner. It's 1 minute. So we're early. We then proceed to wait for half an hour for our appointment to be called because the doctor was running late. Now, we all know that that is high chance, right? When you go to any kind of medical appointment, that there is a good chance that that medical professional is going to be running late. And they were. And we waited for 30 minutes. And that kind of didn't bother me that much in the sense that I knew that we might have to wait. I didn't have any appointments. I'd sort of planned my day around these appointments. But I felt my whole body starting to go into this very uncomfortable state. And what I noticed was how stupid I felt. I felt really, really, really silly for pulling us away from that first thing, knowing that we were the next people to be called. And I had just created more work for ourselves, more work for myself, more time that I was going to have to take out of some other day to go and do that later. And my inner dialogue was like, that was really stupid. You should have known. You know that medical professionals are always running late. Like, that was silly. You've wasted so much time. You literally sat there for, nearly 40 minutes and then you wasted that time by leaving and then coming and sitting in another waiting room and waiting another 40 minutes. So this inner dialogue started, right? And I'm aware of it and I'm noticing it and I'm starting to get really frustrated. And I noticed that I'm like kind of scowling a little bit in the waiting room and I'm sort of feeling a bit short with things. And my child was doing something and it was just grating on my nerves, even though it wasn't even a big deal. And I could just feel this kind of building up of frustration. We went into the appointment half an hour after we got there. We had the appointment. The professional was lovely, literally one of the nicest people I've ever met. And it was fine. Like the appointment was fine. Took my child to school. And then I'm driving home and I notice, is that person sitting too close behind me? Like, what is going on here? Get off my tail. And I am getting so frustrated at every little thing that was going on. And I had to really take a second to pause and just be like, no, hang on. My brain, my body has very much gone into everything's a problem now, right? Because I was so cross at myself for messing up. So I wanted to share this part with you because this is what happens, right, in our sensitive minds, in our sensitive nervous systems. None of that was really that big of a deal. But what I told myself about what it meant about me created a lot of distress. And it then kind of multiplied in front of me. It was sort of like, now it's a bad day. Everything's going to be bad. Everything's going to go wrong. And that was kind of, I was proving my point, right? This person was sitting too close to me. A few other things went wrong that day. Like it was just a day where it really did feel like everything was just kind of not coming up, Erica. It was like, everything is just not working here. And so I guess I'm stumbling here because I'm thinking, where do I want to go? But I guess my big point with this is that there were a couple of things that were poking on my sensitivity. One was that I had this feeling of like, I shouldn't waste time. That's this thing that, I'm working on. I've been working on for a really long time, but this feeling of like, I shouldn't waste time. There is only, finite amount of time and I've wasted some of it. How irresponsible. So I was really sensitive to that inner criticism, but I was also very sensitive to the justice of it all, right? And this is something that comes up a lot for highly sensitive and neurodivergent people. There is this real justice sensitivity of like, this is how it should be. And it can be very difficult to readjust to the way things are because of that sense of justice sensitivity. And so there was a little bit of that going on for me too, of like, we shouldn't have to wait. We waited our fair time at the first appointment and then we had to leave. Like there was a bit of that going on for me as well. So I'm very aware of this, right? This is one of the things that I find can be kind of a little bit uncomfortable with being highly sensitive too. Sometimes we're very self-aware. And so I'm aware of all of this going on and I'm thinking, oh gosh, I'm kind of stuck in this self-criticism loop. I'm stuck in this justice loop. What am I going to do to support myself through it? And so I want to share with you what I did. And the first thing that I did was noticed how critical I was being towards myself. And that didn't immediately stop the criticism, but I was able to recognize that it was a story, that it was poking on something that felt vulnerable to me, right? That feeling that I might have wasted time, and yeah, sort of that sense of not wasting time was a really big part of it. And so there was that going on, and I was aware of that as being a old story, a familiar trigger. And so by being able to see that, I was able to go, oh, this is part of the reason this is so painful, right? Because the thought that you could be wasting time is a painful thought. And so I really leaned into self-compassion of saying, yeah, you are really uncomfortable right now. This is really irritating you. And it isn't going to help if you beat yourself up about it. It isn't going to help if you just continue to spiral around this same thought of you shouldn't be wasting time. So what else is true, And I had to sit with that a little bit and notice, oh, I feel really grateful that I have this time, right? That I could take my child to do these things, that I didn't have to ask anyone for the morning off, that I could just do that. That was a wonderful thing. And so it wasn't about gaslighting myself into being like, well, you shouldn't feel this way. It was more around, you do feel this way and it makes sense, but don't beat yourself up in the midst of that. So self-compassion was a huge part of how I managed that. And then I also used my breath. So I spent time doing the deep breathing, extending my exhalation in an attempt to, downregulate my system, drop my heart rate. I did a little bit of movement, just really simple stuff in my chair when I got home to do work. And it didn't mean that the uncomfortable feelings disappeared straight away. It actually took me most of the day to kind of recover, which is interesting because now as I'm thinking about it, and I'd written myself a few little notes here on my book, so I'm looking down at my notes, and I remember when I wrote those notes, I was still a little bit heightened. And now looking at it, I'm like, that wasn't really a very big deal. But it felt like one in the moment. And this is the thing, I guess, that I really want to share with you as like maybe a takeaway from all of this, is that when we are in the heat of something that feels really distressing to us as highly sensitive people or just people in general, we need to trust that over time we are going to feel differently and that we can recover and that it isn't a personal failing that we find ourselves in that state. Every single human on earth is going to be triggered. Every single human on earth is going to have self-criticism pop up, have self-doubt pop up, have frustration pop up, have things that we do that we think, what was I thinking? This is going to happen. It's going to happen more than once. It is going to happen forever. That doesn't mean that we don't, see and look for opportunities to grow as people and to develop our capacity for self-regulation and community regulation and co-regulation and all of those things. Of course we do that. But it's never with the goal of being perfect, Because if the goal is to be perfect and to never experience those human things, you're going to be sorely disappointed. And then when it happens, you're going to criticize yourself even more because it's like, I should have been able to be perfect. But the truth is, no, you shouldn't have been able to be perfect because you are a human, not a robot. And so, I spend literally all day, every day, pretty much all day, every day, in some way thinking about, supporting, teaching, embodying, learning about self-compassion, self-kindness, self-care, self-love, all of these things. And this still happens to me. And I don't make it mean anything other than I am human. Even when the voice tries to tell me, no, you're silly, right? You wasted so much time. Okay. We're scared of wasting time. That makes sense then, that I would be dysregulated by this, that I would be frustrated by this, that I would be cross about this. And I don't have to automatically believe everything that my brain tells me because a lot of it's just nonsense. A lot of it's not true. A lot of it is based in these fears around what do I need to be in the world in order to be enough, to be accepted, to be loved, to be important, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what it is for us humans. We just want to belong. We want to feel like we're enough. And so that cruel voice that pops up from time to time, or maybe a little more frequently than that, it's kind of just trying to keep us in line so that we don't do anything silly to ruin our chances at belonging. But when we believe it without a little bit of skepticism, a little bit of interrogation, even into what's going on, then we can slip very quickly into shame, right? I'm bad. I'm not good. The truth is, you're human, and so am I, and so are all of us. So I hope that that story helps you to maybe feel a little bit less alone. Maybe you listen and you think, gee, she's got some work to do. I mean, don't we all, and don't we forever? um, but I thought it was a really interesting experience for me anyway, where I was able to very much watch myself in real time kind of have the acceleration of distress, I guess, in some ways, and then really watch myself throughout the day to notice how did I deal with that. And it was a very conscious process, and like I said, it lived in me for a while. I think it really dug its claws in a little longer than I would have thought. I had a bit of a hard time letting it go. But what I didn't do was get stuck in beating myself up. And that's the important part. Sometimes when I talk to people about self-compassion, they're, one of the things that I'm really careful to explain is how self-compassion, when we are acting into self-compassion, when we are living compassionately towards ourselves and towards others, it's not evidence that we're doing a good job if we never suffer and we never have that cruel voice pop up and we never have the criticism, because we only need compassion because of those things existing. If we weren't cruel to ourselves, if we weren't, critical of ourselves, we wouldn't really need to be compassionate because we wouldn't suffer in the same way. So it's not evidence that you're messing up if you still have those thoughts, if the mean inner critic still comes to play, because of course it does. But over time, if we practice compassion and kindness towards ourselves with regularity and commitment, then what we'll find is that the frequency of those harsh thoughts might decrease. The volume certainly decreases. And our ability to see beyond that, to kind of see that, oh, this isn't the whole truth or maybe even true at all, and to have the tools to be able to work through it, that gets easier. So even though I found that whole experience kind of frustrating, distressing, and push my buttons in a very real way, then it was over. Then it was done. Uh, I didn't allow it to define too much of me. So yeah, that's my thoughts today. I've had a little bit of a surge of ideas for things we can talk about over the next few weeks. But if you want to add to my list by making a suggestion or a request or asking any questions, please feel free to come over and find me on Instagram. Comment below if you are on YouTube. If you're looking for me on Instagram, you'll find me at ericawebb_selfkind. And of course, you can visit my website as well, ericawebb.com.au. And over on my website, you'll find the different ways that you can work with me and a contact form if you'd rather contact me that way. All right. I hope that you have a wonderful day, whatever it is that you are up to, and keep being kind to your wonderful, highly sensitive self. I'll be back to chat with you again soon.